Cyberpunk 2077, a game that is polarizing enough to be both loved and hated by many. Renowned for its solid gunplay and RPG mechanics. What would happen if I decided to ignore the shooter aspect of the game completely and go for a melee juggernaut playstyle? Well, that's exactly what I'm here to explore. So strap in and enjoy the journey as we play through Cyberpunk 2077 on very hard with a melee only build. Let's quickly cover the rules of this challenge. Rule number 1. I'm not allowed to use firearms or explosives unless otherwise forced to by the game. I will only rely on melee weapons or my fists. I am allowed to use throwing weapons, but I won't make a habit of cheesing enemies with them. Rule number 2. I must play the game on the very hard difficulty setting, which is the current hardest difficulty in Cyberpunk. Rule number 3. Only utility hacks allowed. I'm not allowed to deal direct damage with hacks such as overheat. Rule number 4. I must beat both the main story and the Phantom Liberty DLC story. Side quests will be done at my own discretion. Okay, for now, those are all the rules I have for you. Now let's talk about the rough idea of the build I'm going for. The body and reflexes tree are the two most important attributes for this build. I'm going to be rushing level 20 in the reflex tree first because it houses some important nodes for a melee playthrough. I start by taking Slippery, which is useful for avoiding damage while dashing and moving quickly. Next are 2 points in Dash, which give me the very important ability to maneuver around enemies and terrain quickly. Then it's on to 3 points in Air Dash, which lets me do the same thing but in midair. At level 20 Reflex, I unlock a very important node, Tailwind. This absolute unit of a skill gives me stamina on air dashes rather than taking it away. Next, I'll be going to the body tree to unlock Painkiller, Adrenaline Rush, Wrecking Ball, and Quake. The core idea of this build is to be a hyper-mobile juggernaut that can mow through anything. Minor skill tree nodes will be covered as I play, and the build is subject to change. Extra perk points will also be spent on blade and blunt weapon specific nodes in the reflex and body tree. Feel free to also give me suggestions on what I should put my points into if you're watching along on the episodic format. With the build covered, we're ready to begin our run. I make my character look like a cyber Viking. I also make sure to choose the smallest genital size because we wouldn't want him being weighed down by a massive hog. Fair warning, at this point, this video will obviously contain story spoilers. After a long opening sequence where I'm given a job and meet up with a large fella named Jackie, Jackie and I find ourselves inside of a building to rescue some chick who got kidnapped. I'm about to enter the first combat zone of the game armed with nothing but my trusty high-fivers. I'm supposed to use stealth to take this guy out, but I accidentally let go of the crouch key, which leads to me getting caught. I fist the guy to death. But a little later on, I end up dying. It's totally in character for me to botch the very first combat encounter. I come back and I do it the right way this time. Next encounter was 2 stealth kills with Jackie's help. I really didn't want to alert all the enemies in this room, so I snuck past them. Here I meet up with the scavenger leader. I have to take this guy out to progress the game. I run up and unleash the hand hammers on this guy's face. This ends up alerting all the enemies in the nearby room that I snuck past earlier. I notice that he has a slow turn radius, so as long as I'm up close and moving around him, away from the direction that he's turning, he can't really hit me. But I mess up and die. Oh boy, this might be harder than I thought it would be. The early game is very rough without any gear or skills, so I have to be smarter in my approach. But I've got this absolute unit Jackie on my team. I can utilize him. Look at him holding steady even as he gets bukkakied by bullets. I backtrack a bit to see if I missed anything, and it turns out I missed something big. There's just a tomahawk on the ground here near the first guy I killed. It has a headshot damage multiplier and armor penetration. Our first weapon. Nice. With this weapon, I can flinch the scav leader, which makes the fight go a lot smoother. I've got Jackie here helping me deal damage to him as I absolutely scalp this guy with the tomahawk. He goes down. Afterwards, as Jackie is driving us away, I get into the first forced gunfight sequence, so I use the pistol to take out the enemies. I level up and gain an attribute point, so I acquire Slippery. It's going to be useful for reducing the damage I take, especially in this sort of playthrough. In my stash back at my apartment, I gain access to a 2-handed club and a katana. So, my inventory setup will be the following. A blade weapon in the first slot, a blunt weapon in the second slot, and the third slot is a throwing weapon. I think this is a solid setup for now, and I'm feeling good about the rest of this run. On my way out of the apartment, I take a slight detour to beat a robot's ass with my bare hands. Aw, look, you can pet a cat in this game. What? John Cena? Every time? Man, Night City is no joke. On my way to the next mission, I spot some gang activity. This is the perfect event to test out my new weapons. As I move into a group of enemies, a grenade conveniently takes them all out, almost killing me in the process. I play baseball with the last remaining enemy's head. After that fiasco, I get into the car with Cyberpunk Rick Ross. I get 2 attribute points, which gives me the very important dash ability. I gotta say, man, I played Cyberpunk for some hours on release, and the amount of bugs in this game has drastically decreased since then. It's really doing wonders for my immersion. I mean, Oh. Anyway, Jackie and I show up at the function to get the flathead robot. Jackie decides to cause a scene, so I figure what the hell, let's kick these guys to the curb. With the dash ability, I can easily duck out of combat and heal with the inhaler. Listen to these satisfying bonks. I loot the neurotoxin knife off that guy's body. It's a throwing weapon that poisons, so I equip it in my throwing weapon slot. I level up again, so I put the perk point on Can't Touch This, which gives me damage mitigation on dashes. Here's why dash is so good. I can quickly close the gap on enemies and begin slicing them up. Shit was starting to get really dicey in this encounter as I got swarmed by enemies. I managed to escape with 6 HP and heal back up. Let's get back into the scrap.
Hot diggity dog!
Man, that encounter was really fun. This game has a way of making you feel like a badass cyber ninja, what with all the hopping around and dashing. I get to a room which houses our first boss fight, Royce. I won't lie, I died a couple of times trying to figure out how I should navigate the fight. Here's how the next sequence went. I open by throwing my knife at the goon next to Royce. This poisons him and gets him low. Then I move in for the finish. Now I can purely focus on the boss. I noticed that I have this little damage window here where I can hit his weak point on his back while he charges up. Jackie has the right idea. I'm also happy to weave and bob around as Jackie chips in, more hitting him as he charges up. I also make use of the knife to get chip damage. The rest of the fight was just getting my hits in where I can to bring his HP lower and lower while I try to avoid dying. At long last, a bonk to his weak spot finally takes him out. I get my first iconic weapon, which in Cyberpunk is like a legendary weapon system. It's a pistol I can't use, so I'll probably just sell it for money. Outside, I discover an important insight with the dash mechanic. If I dash, then jump, then land and dash in the brief moment I have on the ground, I can bunny hop. Son of a... I can even keep up with Jackie as he drives away with his motorcycle. If you ever wonder what Jackie does when he drives away, look, this is it. Look at his dumb face. I acquire 2 more perk points, so I put a point in parkour, which increases my vault and climbing speed. And I also put a point into painkiller on the body tree, which gives me a slow health regen in combat. By the way, I can even bunny hop backwards. Oh, come on, not again. Oh, excuse me, officer. I hope you're having a lovely day. My name is Coderp, and I've invested myself into a mainly only run of Cyberpunk 2077. So I go to Lizzie's bar and meet up with Evelyn and Judy, who end up throwing my ass into a DMT trip. After that, I join a meeting with Jackie, T-Bug, and Dexter Dijon. They task me with infiltrating a hotel in order to steal an important relic from Arasaka. Shit goes down at the hotel and Yorinobu decides to choke out his father. This cues up an action sequence where Jackie and I have to escape the hotel. I grab a dagger from the dead Arasaka patriarch. This will be useful as I was told to leave all my weapons behind when I entered the hotel. Jackie Chan and I test our stunt skills by jumping into a different building. I regain control of my character, and it's now time to unleash hell as I try to escape with the relic. I let myself get spotted by a guard. There's going to be a bunch of combat encounters here. Here's how it went. Throwing my dagger in this encounter means I was going to be left with my fists, so I'll try to avoid doing that moving forward. After I Mike Tyson this guy, of course. With the power attack on this weapon, I can straight up shank people in the face. This part's pretty annoying. There's multiple enemies spraying at me in a fairly narrow hallway. I go in for chip damage and dash away. I need to play hit and run while I let my tank Jackie eat bullets. I guess even the tank has their limits. Anyway, I get a crowbar off one of these goons. It'll be useful as a backup weapon in case I throw my knife. I'm about to stealth so hard on these guys, hell, they have no idea. Oh shit. This super tanky enemy type starts coming out. These guys can take quite a while to kill. Yeah, get him, Jackie. Holy shit, did you see that? Jackie decided to LARP as the Flash. There's another enemy tank type here, but I can spin the gauntlet on this noob while I perform unscheduled surgery on his face. After about a minute, he goes down. This earns me a passive skill tree in the Shinobi tree. I now have 5% increased movement speed. Excellent. This area is really messed up, man. There's loads of these tanky enemy guard types, and when I go to hit one, they all focus me. I take the first guard out. After messing around with the rest of the guys for a bit, I make the executive decision to see if I could skip this part of the game. Turns out I could. I don't have the gear or levels to deal with these enemies, so I'll leave them this time, but I won't make skipping combat scenarios a habit, don't worry, he says as he skips the very next combat encounter because it was the same as the last one. Another forced gunfight encounter as we escape the hotel. When we're safely away from danger, Jackie hits me with the "I don't feel too good, Mr. Stark." I meet back up with Dexter Dijon, who betrays me. Who could have seen that coming? I wake up in a memory from the relic where I'm playing as Johnny Silverhand. I know Kung Fu. Interesting thing about Silverhand, he has a quick melee attack that sends flames out. You could make the case that this isn't a melee attack, but the game classifies it as one, so I'm going to use it, because it's just too damn cool not to. It does have a gnarly long reload animation though. It's worth noting that Silverhand also regenerates his HP bar pretty quickly when he's out of combat. This part is mostly going to consist of me jumping around while I wait for the quick melee to reload. For the enemies upstairs, I took a hit and run heavy approach, where I applied the burn dot from the melee attack, and then jumped down to the floor below. Rinse and repeat.
Let's see who fists the fastest.
The elite enemy here was a straight up pushover. A couple of melees and he crumbled faster than an Oreo in milk. This is how Johnny Silverhand died. Rogue decided to hit legs 5 days out of the week and skip arm day. Let this be a lesson to you all. Back in the present, I wake up where you were conceived as a child. That's right, Mom was taking against the dumpster. Sorry you had to hear it from me. Crap, guess I'm back to using regular mustard. Oh, I'm sorry, Takamura. The only thing they had in that dumpster was Drakkar Noir. Another one of these car sequences. You know, I'm not a fan of these personally. Generally, once you've seen them once in a game, you've kind of seen them all. Takamura ends up taking me to Vix, who tells me that Keanu Reeves is killing me slowly by overriding my conscience. Honestly, I can think of much worse ways to die. Back at the crib, I grab my usual weapons. I'm now at a high enough reflex level to grab the all-important air dash skill. Back in the open world, a little bit of Googling revealed to me a location where I can potentially get legendary Mantis Blades. So I start air dashing there because real shinobi don't use cars. As I swing into the function like I'm Tarzan, I get into my first Cyber Psycho fight. Luckily, this guy's weak to my throwing knife. It reveals him and lets me get free slashes in with the katana while I dash away. I repeat this sequence a couple more times. When I get him to half-life, he flashbangs me and runs away. So I chase him down, but a gang ends up pulling up on us. I play this counter evasively because the Cyber Psycho can help me take out the enemies, while the enemies also tag up the Cyber Psycho. Now all that's left is the mini-boss and the Cyber Psycho. They've been fingering each other's mouths this entire time. I can swoop in with lube to help finish them off. That's the mini-boss down. And, well, I kind of blundered that immensely. So I come back, I get him to 50% HP again, kill all the goons, and now it's just a mini-boss and the Psycho again. That's the mini-boss down. And that's the Cyber Psycho down. Awesome. I get a nice amount of street cred for killing him, but what about the Mantis Blades? Well, earlier when I checked the container that was supposed to have the Mantis Blades, there was just a crappy neurotoxin knife. What gives? Well, some Google Fu reveals that the legendary spawn was patched out of the game at some point. It makes sense. The devs probably don't want the player accessing such a powerful item so early in the game. So let's go get a regular pair of blades from a Ripper Doc. I pick up a pair of Mantis Blades, and I also grab Gorilla Arms. Unfortunately, these weapons aren't going to be very good until I unlock the Phantom Liberty relic system, so I'll keep relying on my melee weapons over these for now. But the Mantis Blades are a good unarmed option for now. Welcome to episode 3 of the Cyberpunk 2077 Melee Only Challenge. When we last left off, we had just gotten the Gorilla Arms and the Mantis Blade implants. Next up on the agenda is to infiltrate a nightclub called Clouds in order to rescue a kidnapped Evelyn Parker. When inside the club, I need a key card to access the VIP room. So I did what any man would do, and I followed another man into the bathroom. I contemplated the ethical implications of killing this man for an access card. I mean, as an avid consequentialist, I really have to consider this from all angles, and I really have to scrutinize— Wait a minute, is he completely missing the urinal?
Just hanging around.
Alright, time to sneak into the VIP section. I relinquished my weapons when I entered the club, so let's look for something. I find a katana and a box nearby. This couch won't stop me. This guy had a throwing knife on him. It's not very good, but it'll do for now. I get to Woodman's office. It's sort of a mini boss fight. He isn't too difficult, but I can die if I'm not careful. My strategy was just dancing around the room while I slash him up with the Mantis Blades. Woodman's death ends up putting the club on high alert, so I have to fight my way out. I open with a knife throw on the motorcycle helmet guy. Then I move in with the finish using power attacks with the katana. Next up is a big body elite enemy. This guy can really take a beating, and he doesn't always stagger when I hit him, so I need to play the encounter evasively. After some dancing around him, I managed to take him out, almost dying in the process. I move down to the next floor. Let's clear it out.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit, I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Oh, don't mind me, playing with the in-game camera. After collecting back my regular weapon loadout, I make my way out of the club. I level up and put a point into the reflex tree. A commenter suggested that I should grab the Flash and Thunderclap perk, so I'll be making my way towards that. Shout out to Bob the Blaster for the suggestion. Speaking of commenters, one of them notified me that I missed the iconic katana Satori earlier in the game. I asked him where at, and another commenter came through with a detailed write-up of how to obtain it. So shout out to Guy, whose name I'm not going to say out loud, and shout out to Dark Touch. This weapon is supposed to be unobtainable after playing the hotel heist mission with Jackie earlier in the game. So at this point, if I wanted this katana, I had two options. The first option was to reload a save earlier to that point in the game. I wasn't really fond of this option since it required me to replay a large portion of the game, which brings me to option 2, breaking into Konpeki Plaza. What exactly makes getting back into Konpeki Plaza after the heist mission so difficult? Well, after the murder of Saburo, the entire area is supposed to be shut down and no one is allowed in. However, the brilliant Cyberpunk community have come up with creative ways of getting into the hotel in order to obtain the iconic katana. So we're going to do just that. Let's break the game. Before I get into Konpeki Plaza, I need two things: the double jump implant and the Kobe C-125 car, both of which cost a considerable sum of money. I'm going to be abusing a money duplicating exploit in order to get enough cash to buy both of these things. If you want a detailed explanation of how this glitch is done, you can go watch McDizzle Gaming's video on the subject matter where he shows you in detail how to perform this glitch. I'm going to explain it very basically. Step 1 is to have one stack of a small junk item in your inventory. In my case, it was 3 bandages. I went to a drop point to sell these bandages because they carry 40,000 eddies, but this should work at most vendors. Next, while in the vendor UI, for PC, hover the item and hold G and left click and then press F. Sell one less than the maximum on the stack. When you do this correctly, the game gives you the money for the item twice and duplicates the entire stack in the buyback menu along with the stack you sold it. You just buy the stack back. From here, it's just rinse and repeating until the vendor runs out of money, then move on to the next vendor. In my case, I only wanted enough money to buy the 2 things I needed, so I jumped up to 71k and figured that would be plenty to get the double jump and the car. After obtaining the cash, I buy the car I need from the internet. Now, I needed to get to the Ripper Doc fingers in order to buy the implant. By the way, by jumping and air dashing around everywhere, I gain XP for the passive shinobi tree. When I get to Finger's office, there was a problem. I was currently tied up in his quest line and I needed to complete it before I could purchase anything from him. So let's go ahead and finish his quest. This quest happens to be the one where I infiltrate a base to save Evelyn Parker. Before infiltrating the building, I find a tire iron in a nearby box. It's a decent little blunt weapon, so I'll use it. After some fighting, Judy joins me to help me find Evelyn. In this area, there were mostly some low-level grunt enemies that I could make short work of with the tire iron. Nothing too difficult or notable. There was also this tanky elite enemy, but with Judy constantly barraging him with bullets and me staggering him with the tire iron, we make short work of him. I ding level 10 in the shinobi tree, which gives me 5% stamina cost reduction on dodging and dashing. Not too incredible, but I thought it was worth mentioning. This is the last little floor before I get to where Evelyn is being held. Hardest thing about this room was picking off the enemies one by one without dying to being shot in the back. What? Don't look at me like that. I finally get to Evelyn and rescue her. Now I can go buy the implants I need from Fingers. I buy reinforced tendons, unlocking the ability to double jump. Now we can break into Konpeki Plaza to obtain Satori. Big shout out to Handsome Tez, who has a great video on how to glitch back into Konpeki Plaza. It's the guide that I followed. First, right outside the plaza, there's a wall that I need to get over. I placed my car next to the wall and double jumped in to get back into the plaza. From there, I simply ran to the entrance of the hotel. Next is the tricky part. I called my car, the Kobe C125, which notably has doors that open traditionally. Next up was jimmying the car into just the right spot to force the hotel door to open. This part took some time as finding the perfect spot was rather finicky. And when I finally hit the right spot, the door should open up just like this. When inside, make your way to this elevator. There's been some debate among the community whether or not this exploit is intentional. After all, CD Projekt Red keeps patching ways to get in, and the community just finds more ways to get in. I'm of the personal belief that obtaining the katana in this way is very much intentional, as a fun little Easter egg of sorts for the players to explore. After all, if they truly wanted to get rid of it, why wouldn't they just remove the Satori spawn after that mission ends? Anyway, after the elevator ride, I make my way to this light fixture to jump on top of it. There's a convenient hole here. Don't get me started on convenient holes. After that, I make this jump here. Then I jump across this big gap over here. Another jump here, and shortly after, another jump. Great, now I can go back to the room where Saburo was murdered. I truly believe this sequence of events is intentional. It all just feels a bit too perfect. I go upstairs to the helipad, and there it is. I finally obtained the Satori katana. The katana has a special effect with the Nehan dagger. Bleeding with one weapon and then striking with the other will cause hemorrhaging, which drains enemy health and rapidly regenerates yours. Also, at some point, I unlock the lead and steel perk, which lets me deflect with a blade weapon. I also pick up seeing double, which increases damage and stun chance on counterattack. Exiting the hotel was as easy as going back the same way I came. Let's test out the hemorrhaging effect of the two weapons. So when I get the bleed off with one weapon and attack with the other, you can see my health rapidly regenerating. This is an absolute game changer for this challenge room. Next up on the docket is to go visit the Voodoo Boys and complete their questline. I meet Placide, who tasks me with rescuing Brigitte, the leader of the Voodoo Boys. In order to do so, I have to fight my way through enemy resistance in a mall. Ah, shut up. After killing the last enemy outside of the mall, Placide calls to tell me to make no noise. Where was that call 10 minutes ago, bud? Once inside the mall, my stealth approach didn't last very long, and I found myself in the middle of an all-out brawl. If anything was going to carry me through this encounter, it was going to be my new hemorrhaging ability and double jumping and dashing around. The key to not dying in this battle was to abuse the hell out of my mobility, staying on the move and getting chip damage on the enemies where I could. The swarms of enemies felt never-ending, but I slowly whittled them down. Ah, what the fuck is that? Finally, after what felt like an eternity of bobbing and weaving around this mall, I take the last enemy out. At last, I've unlocked the all-important Tailwind perk. My air dashes no longer consume stamina, and I gain stamina from double jumps and air dashes. Shortly after, I get into another boss fight, Matilda K. Rose. She's a melee combatant with a large HP pool and a giant hammer that can nuke me if I'm not careful, which I found out the hard way, of course. Upon re-entering the fight, I saw a glowing purple light on her back. I figured it must be her weak spot. Upon destroying her weak spot, she drops her hammer for me to collect after the fight. She switches to using her hands, which still really hurt. I continued to play a hit and run style. After some time, my damage over time bleeds end up taking her out. I pick up and equip her weapon, the Sasquatch hammer, an iconic blunt weapon that neuters my ability to sprint, dodge, and jump. For that reason, I probably won't use the weapon much, but let's test it out. Holy shit! I meet a Netwatch agent and I cut a deal with him. My actions here will later anger the Voodoo Boys. I unlock the Flash and Thunderclap perk. Since I've already hit 20 reflex, I'll start putting the attribute points in body, but I want to finish getting the important blade nodes in the reflex tree, so I'll keep dumping perk points into it until I have all of them. By the way, the passive skill tree has given me a perk point for hitting 15 in Headhunter. I'll get another perk point shortly from the Shinobi tree as well. Back at the Voodoo base, Brigitte appears and offers to help me with my virus chip problem, so it's time for another Johnny Silverhand sequence. As Silverhand, I meet up with Rogue and Santiago, who I can only assume is Cyberpunk Hassan Piker. Turns out I was tailed on my way here, so the place is infested with enemies now. Remember, when I play a Silverhand, I only have the ability to quick melee and my fists. I don't have access to the advanced movement techniques that I do when I'm playing V. As a result, I died here. A lot. So, let's focus on the sequence where I didn't die. Here's a quick montage. And with this final kill, a forced gunfight sequence begins. So I take care of that business really quickly. After that, Silverhand and the gang decide to infiltrate Arasaka Tower. More Silverhand combat, but I have one extra person in the gang assisting me. I encounter a hallway with a turret that automatically tracks me. Initially, this looks like a tricky encounter, but one of my teammates just blows up the turret. Problem solved. There's also another turret room, this time with 2 turrets. A teammate takes out the first one, so I jump in to punch out the second one. The next room was a boss fight, Akira. A really easy fight since I had 3 other people constantly shooting at him. I just jumped around and meleeed him where I could, making sure to avoid taking damage. My gang ends up finishing him off.
Get out of my way.
Damn, Johnny. Damn, Johnny! After finding Ult in the cybernet, she kills all the Voodoo Boys who were jacked in order to avoid Netwatch from tracking her. This naturally pisses off all the Voodoo Boys, so I have to fight my way out of their base. Getting out of this base was proving to be quite difficult as many of the spaces were tight and cramped, so I couldn't use the full range of my mobility. I slash and hammer my way through the grunt enemies and make it to a boss fight. It's Placide, and he is not happy with me. Placide can be a rather difficult fight. He mainly uses a shotgun, but he can also swap to melee. Whenever I throw my knife at him, he dodges it. Best I could hope for was to stay mobile by dashing around and abusing Flash and Thunderclap to quickly close the distance between us for damage. However, I ended up dying to a shotgun. I came back to try again. This time my strategy was to spin a Rooney around him and hope that he misses all of his shotgun shots. This mostly was proving to work out, however there were a couple scary moments where I almost died. I repeated this until he finally went down. Outside the Voodoo Boys base, I get a call from Songbird. This call signifies the start of the Phantom Liberty questline. I get enough perk points to unlock the Blade finisher. Hello and welcome to the Phantom Liberty section of the video. This should go without saying, but there will be heavy Phantom Liberty spoilers coming up. I'm also going to start streamlining the video from here and being stricter with what's worth showing to you guys. Otherwise this video would be way too long and it'll feel way too dragged out. So without further ado, let's play Phantom Liberty using melee only. I meet up with Songbird, which allows me to unlock the Phantom Liberty relic system. Most notably, I can now leap to enemies with the Mantis Blades to perform a devastating attack. Here's what it looks like. First, I charge the blades by performing a finisher, then I can use a charge attack to leap to an enemy. Songbird tasks me with saving the President, whose plane just crashed. On the way there, I meet some heavy enemy resistance. The blade finisher can get a little buggy at times, but I think it's quite hilarious. It can also go pretty damn far, in case you were wondering about the range. I meet up with President Myers, and together we have to fight our way out of enemy territory. So far, Phantom Liberty has been non-stop action. It really gets the blood pumping. Fighting alongside Myers, we're told by Songbird to stave off the soldiers until she can take control of a nearby Chimera robot. However, Songbird loses control of the robot and now we're made to run away from this killer machine. A video game trope as old as time. After some running and falling down many holes, rolls, we get into our first boss fight of Phantom Liberty, the Chimera. Let me tell you, this is not an easy fight for the current setup I have. The Chimera is a robot enemy, so it's immune to my bleeding and hemorrhaging effects, which also neuters a lot of my survivability via the Nehan and Satori combo. I died quite a bit during this boss fight while trying to get the hang of how to beat it with a melee setup. The fight first required me to blow up certain weak spots on the Chimera by attacking the highlighted points while also dodging attacks. Once enough of the weak spots were taken out, these drones come out to repair the Chimera, and the fight goes into phase 2. If I wanted any chance of beating this fight, I had to take out all the drones before proceeding. After taking out the drones, it was just a matter of respecting the Chimera's attacks by dodging them, and then going in for DPS in the little downtime I had before the next attack. Needless to say, my melee weapons were doing very little damage to the Chimera, so this ended up being a very long fight. But I played it patiently and stuck to my game plan as I whittled it down little by little. I eventually got it down really low, and that's when I knew this would be the winning fight. I go in for the finishing sequence. And that was the Chimera fight. It took me about 45 minutes of attempts to beat it. An excellent boss design from CD Projekt Red. I get Myers to a safe hideout location. Her life is in danger from assassination attempts from a powerful political leader known as Kurt Hansen. She tells me to contact Reed, a former agent that used to work for her. Reed is played by a familiar face, as I'm sure most of you are aware. Reed and I make contact with Alex, another former agent, who wasn't all too happy to see Reed. However, she eventually agrees to help. Together, Reed and I break into a Voodoo Boys base to meet with Slider, a netrunner who we need to continue the mission. Nothing too crazy in this encounter, just me abusing Blade Finisher a ton to kill enemies. Shit goes down when we reach Slider as he gets zeroed by Songbird, who is slowly being corrupted by the Black Wall, which is a firewall in place to contain the cyberspace. More fighting as we leave the hideout. Now we need a connection who will get us into the Black Sapphire, a hotel where we can meet with Songbird. Mr. Han agrees to help as long as I run some gigs for him around the city. The first gig is pretty simple. I need to guide some police officers out of enemy territory. The boss of this gig, Dodger, shows up and a fight breaks out. However, it was a really next fight. Not really much to talk about in this gig. On to the next one. The next gig was to fight my way through a scav hideout. I meet an engineer named Hassan who helps me escape the hideout. Hans sends over a merc who collects some schematics I picked up in the scav base. Second gig over. The third gig was a bit trickier. It started off with some standard fighting, but things got a lot harder when I got to the area boss, the Robot R MK2. As mentioned earlier, my gear is very weak against robots. This fight was especially hard because the boss had attacks that were difficult to dodge and would also spawn ads that were robot types. I kept dying without even getting the boss low, so I figured it was time to upgrade. I made my way to a Ripper Dock. I buy the electrified Mantis Blades since robot enemies are weak to electricity. I also buy the Chitin Cyberware upgrade, which gives me a notable boost in my armor and health regeneration. I come back to test my new gear as I make my way to the robot. My survivability massively went up after getting the upgrades. However, killing the boss is still going to be a tricky affair. There's a long animation at the start of the fight that lets me get free hits in. It doesn't do any damage at first, but it lets me build up to a finisher, which knocks off about 4% of the boss's HP. I could do the good old spin strategy to avoid most of the boss's damage, but I still had to respect any ads that were shooting at me because they do mass amounts of damage. So this was yet another encounter where I had to play very slowly and evasively. A lot of time in this fight was spent hiding behind columns waiting for my heal to come back up and slowly taking out the ads. Once the ads were dead, I could go in for DPS on the boss. Even with the lightning weapon, my damage was not very high. You know the drill from here, it was just rinsing and repeating until I took the boss out. That one was a doozy for sure. One of the harder fights in this challenge, next to the Chimera fight you just saw. After that, Mr. Hands is grateful enough that he reveals himself to me. Reed gives me some interesting insights into his past. But we're not really here for story summary, so I'm summarizing the main story points pretty quickly and vaguely. The next mission is breaking into the Black Sapphire. There's a forced gunfight sequence here. I cover Reed by taking out some enemies with a sniper rifle. After that, we made it to the main area of the Black Sapphire. Here we meet up with Songbird, who asks us to help free her from the clutches of her captors. We also have a conversation with two French people, and Kurt Hansen, who lets Reed and I simply walk out of the premises. Here I am showing off some cool knife tricks to these hobos, but I guess they aren't interested. I steal the French people's identities so we can impersonate them in order to break into Hansen's base. This is a critical juncture in the story where I can choose to side with Reed or Songbird. I choose to betray Songbird, which ends up angering her and getting Alex killed. I had to leave my weapons in a locker at the start of this mission, so I pick up and equip some random knife. Also, I still have my Mantis Blades, so that's gonna carry me. Time to fight my way out. After taking out many guards, Kurt Hansen shows up and his boss fight begins. Hansen is actually a fairly easy fight for my build compared to the robot bosses earlier. I just take out his ads one by one until it's just me and him. By the way, those red diamonds you see on the enemies are called vulnerabilities. I unlock them via the Phantom Liberty relic system. When I do enough damage to the vulnerabilities, I get a little EMP blast and a small burst of damage. Hansen was very vulnerable to the spinny technology, so most of the fight he couldn't damage me. Also, after hitting him a little bit, I could perform finishing attacks, which deals a lot to his health. I did, however, have to watch out for his grapple attacks, which dealt a ton of damage. But after he would do one of his grapples, I had plenty of time to run away or heal after. I finished him off with the Mantis Blades. Good riddance. Reed breaks me out of the hideout and then we end up planning our next move. Songbird is considered a cyber psycho at this point and a massive threat to the general public. After some waiting around, I get shown a simulation by Reed and some soldiers about a transport containing Song. Our plan was to break her out from police custody. When the transport arrives, I open the truck that contains Song, but some max tac officers end up being inside. This triggers a boss fight with them. This boss fight had multiple units involved shooting at me, so I had to make use of cover to dodge enemy fire. I also had Reed on a balcony nearby, incapacitating one officer at a time. The key to this encounter was to isolate a cop and deal as much damage to them as I could before I had to run or dash away. That's the last officer down. It really was not that bad of a fight. Song ends up taking control of the truck and fleeing. I end up following her to the point of no return. This is where one of the endings to the Phantom Liberty questline takes place. By the way, you may have noticed I was getting a yellow shield over my HP bar in the last encounter. This is from the Adrenaline Rush ability in the body tree. It gives me some shielding after using the inhaler. Tracking down Songbird in these tunnels was no easy task. It mainly consisted of me hacking into these terminals to get key doors open. Eventually, a giant spider robot shows up and hunts me down as I go to these terminals. The gameplay here is very reminiscent of horror games. I'm personally not a fan. There was no combat here, but I had to make it through this section to see how this story ends. Spoilers for one of the endings is coming up, by the way. After accessing all the terminals, I make it to the core where Songbird is housed. She asks me to kill her. I figured she's been through enough, so I honor her wish. Reed shows up, and he isn't happy about my decision to kill Songbird. We later end up handing her body over to the government. And a little later after that, Reed ends up contacting me to tell me I made the right call. A solid ending to a solid expansion. Now all that's left to do is to wrap up the main game story. So let's hop to it. The next story beat we're going to cover is to go meet with Takamura. He wants an audience with Hanako Arasaka in order to inform her of the truth behind her father's death. Unfortunately, he gets denied, so we start scheming about how we could get into contact with her. Now I'm made to infiltrate an Arasaka warehouse in order to infect their computer systems with a virus. The enemies at this stage in the game actually do quite a bit of damage to me, so while the game has gotten easier with gear and upgrades, the threat of dying is still very real. There we go, computer infected. On to the next mission. Now it's time to go through Panam's storyline to progress the game. Rogue basically tells me to go help Panam figure out where her lost ride and merchandise is. After some setup in the area, it's just a standard fight here, nothing too notable. Afterwards, Panam asks me to help her take revenge on Nash, a man who betrayed her. This fight is a bit harder than the last one. The Nash fight has a lot of goons that shoot me in the back while I'm fighting other enemies. This is funny. Sometimes when I swap weapons, I get the katana finisher for the Mantis Blades. Also, sometimes enemies move to where my character is for the finishers, rather than me moving to them. That's the Nash fight completed. Next major mission in this storyline is to take out some Kang Tao operatives and rescue some Aldecados who got roped into this mess. I really hated this encounter because it was all robot type enemies and there was constant missile barrages coming my way from the turrets. Damn! Yo, what is this thing? Get away from me! What is happening right now? Oh, also, I should mention, at some point I ended up getting the pain to gain skill in the body tree. It should help me out quite a bit in encounters like this one. Next up, I gotta infiltrate a gas station to get to Anders Hellman. Nothing too crazy here, although some of the enemies are armed with shotguns, which is a nightmare to deal with for my build. Inside the gas station, I find Anders and drag him to a motel room. Now we're ready for the festival heist mission. I basically have to go around neutralizing snipers to give Takamura an opening to get to Hanako. The first sniper kill was easy. All I had to do was get behind him and execute him. The second sniper, I had to fight my way to him. That's the second sniper down. And that's the last sniper that I have to kill. Hanako's bodyguard Oda shows up. This starts a boss battle with him. The Oda fight is fairly easy as long as I play it slow and dodge his attacks. He's also susceptible to bleeding, which makes the fight much easier on my end. Oda likes to do an attack where he pulls out what I believe is an SMG and fires at me. This attack is easy to dodge as there's plenty of spots where I can break line of sight. He also has this move where he camouflages into cover and begins healing slowly. But when I interrupt him out of this, it staggers him and gives me a free DPS phase. Another attack he likes to do is this camouflage sword barrage rush, but I simply knife him out of it. That's pretty much the whole fight. It took longer than it should have because I let him heal more than I should have, but overall it was a fairly easy fight. Takamura ends up kidnapping Hanako in order to convince her of her brother's treachery. Shit goes down when Arasaka figures out our location, and I now have to fight my way out. Fighting in these narrow corridors where I was quite constricted in how I could move was proving to be quite challenging. I escape the building and pass out. Johnny takes over from here. I unlock quick ability for blunt weapons. Most of this playthrough has been blades, so I think it's time to grab gorilla hands. I make sure to grab the lightning variant of tier 4 gorilla arms. This will help me out against robot enemies. Let's test these bad boys out in the next mission. Alright, these are pretty awesome. I just need to unlock the blunt weapon finisher to really make them pop. We're in the home stretch now. It's time to do the final mission of the game, Nocturne OP55N1. In case you're wondering about the big story decisions, I make the decision to break into Arasaka Tower as V. Oh look! There's the cat! Don't worry, it's not John Cena this time, I promise.
John Cena!
Last step before Arasaka Tower. I have to free Hanako from captivity. I grab Hanako, now we're gonna go to the final area of the game. Ending spoilers are coming up pretty soon. Hanako shows me that Saburo's consciousness is still alive via Soul Killer. Next, at the board meeting, where we reveal the truth of what happened to Saburo, we end up getting ambushed by Yorinobu's goons. This cues up a sequence where I have to fight my way up Arasaka Tower to get to Yorinobu. This next room has heavy enemy resistance, but if I simply wait it out, my allies gain control of turrets in the room to mow the enemies down. The last guard gets taken out. I barely had to do anything except run and dash away. Now we're at the final boss of the game, Adam Smasher. Smasher is a pretty difficult fight. He has a lot of HP and does a lot of damage. His attack patterns are fairly straightforward until you get him down to about half HP. He then proceeds to launch a missile barrage that kept me on the move. He also spawns adds while this is happening to keep me on my toes. My first attempt was going pretty well. I got him down to 40% before perishing to a missile barrage. On my way back, I decided to grab the blunt weapon finisher skill because why not? Better late than never. The next several attempts were a struggle as I was getting the hang of the fight. At the start of the fight, I can get a ton of free damage on his vulnerability, as Smasher just sorta stands there. I needed to really respect his attacks, as his melee hits did especially high amounts of damage. There we go, that's a phase. Once the adds were dead and the missile barrage was over, I could go back to beating his ass. He only has one arm now, so dodging his moves was a lot easier. And I end up phasing him again. More adds to kill. Proccing one of the vulnerabilities on Smasher does a lot of damage to him. This is key to ending the fight quicker. And now getting him down to 15% basically damaged him to the point where the fight becomes a joke. From there, finishing him off was really easy. And that's pretty much the end of all combat in the game. There's Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty and the main campaign completed using melee only. If you care about which ending I got, stick around a little bit longer. The ending I got was the standard Arasaka ending with Hanako and Yorinobu, as I really didn't complete much side content. I opted to get rid of Johnny Silverhand, and I opted to go back home to die in peace, rather than live on in Soulkiller. This sort of thing probably reflects the decision I would make in real life if I was somehow placed under these circumstances. That's the end of this challenge. If you enjoyed watching, please consider liking and subscribing for more. More challenge content is in the works. Thank you for being here for this entire journey, and feel free to leave suggestions about what I should do next.